Folks, welcome to the channel. I'm Don. I seriously hope this video is not blocked because it's a conversation between Richard Dawkins and Stephen Hawking. And I have no idea what they're talking about, but when I say YouTube recommended it to me, and I'm like, oh, I've got to get this one. So I'm just reacting to it. I'll add my comments as I'm thus inspired, but sometimes these things are so compelling that it's like impossible to find a moment to break into it and add comments. But I will if I think it's appropriate. And this channel is not divided, contrary to what the name might imply. And I'm probably going to change the name of the channel because it's giving some people the impression that it's about establishing theology. It's not. It's about thinking theology, whether you're anti-theological, whether you're atheist, whether you're pro-theology, believe there's a creator, some energy, whatever. Life has, we're generally speaking in search of some sort of meaning, certainly some sort of understanding of the way in which life works. We're wired for pattern recognition, for survival purposes, among other things. So we want to know how things work. And the creative mind, the brain, can imagine things that we don't observe scientifically, but it doesn't mean those things don't exist. But it just means that different people have different thresholds of proof for what they're willing to believe or want to believe.
For me, the essence of what scientists do is not maths or experiments, abstract thought, or even applying for research funding, but asking questions.
Yes.
Newton wanted to know why things fell to the ground. Darwin, why animals were different in different places.
Tectonic
I'm
shifts.
on my way to talk to Stephen Hawking about some of the questions we are both still asking. I want to ask him his views on evolution. As a physicist, does he think that the origin of life on Earth is just a happy coincidence?
This is why the channel is titled Thinking Theology. This is exactly what they're doing. And it's like, is there more to the picture than what we're immediately seeing?
The existence of the Earth and the properties that made it possible for biological life to develop depend on a very fine balance between the so-called constants of nature. If they were more than slightly different, either planets like the Earth would not occur, or the chemical processes necessary for life would not take place. One might take this as evidence for a divine creator, but an alternative explanation is what is known as the multiverse. The idea is that there are many possible universes. Only in the small number of universes that are suitable will intelligent beings develop and be able to ask the question, why is the universe so carefully designed?
What happened before the Big Bang? What happened before the origin of space and time?
In Newton's theory, time was separate from space and ran from the infinite past to the infinite future. However, Newton's theory was superseded by Einstein's general theory of relativity. This allowed the beginning of the universe to be like the South Pole, with degrees of latitude playing the role of time. Asking for a time before the beginning would be like asking for a point south of the South Pole. Can one assume that insects and bacteria will survive us if our so-called intelligence leads us to destroy ourselves by nuclear war or other disasters?
Yes, I think you've got an excellent point. We happen to survive by our intelligence, and so we think that's the way you should survive. But from a bird's point of view, say a swift, they would think that flying is the way you survive.
Well, mankind survives primarily to cooperation. We have rules, social contracts, if you will. There are laws, there are customs that we observe. But by and large, we've done well to cooperate. Your toilet breaks in your house, you call somebody, and you pay them to come fix your toilet, whatever your roof, whatever your car, whatever. And that's part of cooperation, where I give you this, you give me that. There are certain rules we observe, we go. I hold the door for you. That's nice. It just says, we're going to keep the peace instead of bashing each other over the head and me stealing your stuff. So we survive differently, a little bit more comfortably by cooperating with one another. And that's why Dawkins said that a bird flying is the way they see, birds would see, to survive, to live, and so on. But what I'm hearing here in the prior two segments too, and I've made this point quite a bit, is that we want to know beginnings. It's the way any argument begins. And I don't mean a contentious one. I mean when you lay out premises and draw conclusions, and then maybe those conclusions form premises in more elaborate arguments and supporting statements and such, those have beginnings. And then where does that argument lead? Where does it end? Where does time begin? Does it begin? How did life on Earth begin? We are wired. That is how we process anything. How did this begin? Detectives, when there's a crime scene, they're trying to reverse engineer to figure out, well, who did it? But the way you figure out who did it is you look at motives. Motives will point back to a beginning. This is how this crime got underway, why it happened, and how it happened. So when I hear these guys saying it, of course, wondering how we got here on Earth is huge. That's why we think in theological terms or non-theological terms. Our evidence may suggest that it just always was here, but that's not how we're wired to think. Like the infinite regress that takes place between atheists and theists is, where did all the matter in the universe come from if not from God? And then the follow-up question is, well, then where did God come from? If you're so into beginnings, where did he come from, or she, or God come from? Because we are wired to think about beginnings. I don't know if we can overcome that penchant.
Eyes are said to have evolved some 40 times independently. Flight has evolved 4 times independently. But it looks as though intelligence, at least verbal intelligence of our kind, has only evolved once. And so that might suggest that it's a pretty esoteric way of surviving. It seems to work very well for us, of course, and we're doing very well. We're overpopulating the planet with it. But if we go too far with it and destroy ourselves and destroy much of life, then of course you're right that other ways of survival will take over, bacteria prominent among them.
One can't help asking, why are you so obsessed with God?
Well, I noticed that you brought up the question of God and I didn't. When you ended A Brief History of Time with "For then we shall know the mind of God," I suspect that you were using God in a sort of Einsteinian sense, a euphemism for the mystery at the root of the universe, that which we don't understand. But most people use the word God for a person, God as an answer to scientific questions. Then I think it is scientifically pernicious, because
perhaps the beginning of scientific questions, where some folks use the word God as an independent agent, and it could be the beginnings, not the answer necessarily.
it distracts people away from the hard work of answering scientific questions. It's just too easy to say, oh, God did it, therefore we don't need to answer the question.
Looking
to the future, do you think there will be scientific geniuses in a world of supercomputers?
Our picture of the universe has been transformed by brilliant individuals, like Newton and Einstein, who have made great leaps in the imagination. Computers cannot make such leaps, so I think there will be plenty more Newtons and Einsteins in the future.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
In the not too distant future, there are certainly going to be major problems. Problems about climate change. Problems about increasing density of population. There will be a problem too about power. How are we to generate power?
Yeah.
Science will produce the answer. What the answer will be, I don't know. But I'm perfectly certain that it is science that will find it for us.
Science does not. People do. And that's where when someone says science, well, the way in which we use language affects the development of thought, the development of ideas within given fields. Politically, certainly. But it was interesting that Dawkins said that language has only had one evolution. I don't know what he means by that. I know the English language, when you listen to early English, say from Ireland from the 17 or 1800s, you do not recognize it as English, even as an English speaker. I'm not quite sure what he means. Linguistically, we are capable of learning multiple languages, especially when we're younger, such that you could take a baby, say, born in China, to Chinese parents, and the next day bring them to Japan or the United States, and they would learn that language immediately. There seems to be a sub layer upon which syntax can be built by exposure, and then formal lessons on how to conjugate verbs improperly and irregular verbs in their respective languages. But he said flight evolved. There were like 4 iterations of flight and 30 iterations of some other, I've forgotten what that was. But the way in which we use language, when folks say this, that science will come up with this, that is basically, it's deifying this particular field. And it's along the lines of saying guns don't kill people, people kill people. In one sense, that is correct, but guns don't kill people. Bullets do. So we have to be, if we want to be precise about what it is that we're saying. I understand. I think that was David Attenborough there in the end. But he said that science will find the answers. It will be, collectively different people working in different fields and the dynamics and good fortune, and just like discovering bacteria not growing in a petri dish, and all of a sudden we've got penicillin stops bacteria, and so you've got antibacterials now and such because of antibiotics, and that was not intentional. He wasn't looking for that, but he found it. All of these different things are human endeavors. So maybe what he means is by the scientific method, we can find answers to problems, but the scientific method also creates the problems that we need to solve. So, but it's the human endeavors that will do it. So I've always found that to be odd. It's kind of like when you're watching a football game, or a basketball game, let's say, and the announcer will say, let's say a field goal kicker misses the field goal, and he's like, he couldn't make that field goal. Or a guy steps up to the free throw line, and he's like, he couldn't make that shot. And it's like, what do you mean he couldn't? You're saying that there was some debilitating factor that meant he couldn't? He didn't make the free throw. He didn't make the field goal, but he'd made that field goal many times before. He'd made that free throw many times before, so he could have. So the way in which we use language, if we're specific about it, will help guide us in what we're searching. But as far as this interview, I love the question and a little smirk on Hawking's face when he said, "Why are you so obsessed with God?" or something like that. And I was curious to hear what Dawkins was going to say. And he said, well, at the end of Hawking's documentary, he mentioned about God, but he said, I think you meant it in the Einsteinian way, in the sense of you just want to know how things work. It's not in the independent agency and a personal being, or even an impersonal being that created everything. You just mean it in that way. But it's fascinating. I mean, I would have loved to have seen what was left on the cutting room floor in this brief exchange between Dawkins and Hawking. You could tell that Dawkins had a reverence, a great respect for Hawking, and understandably so. So anyway, it's just fun to see these things. You may not even learn a whole lot new from what they say, and maybe you do. I mean, I generally do, but it adds greater texture, greater understanding, just certain nuances to our understanding of how various people in their various fields think about things. So, and theology and its implications are included. All right, guys, hope you enjoyed that. Have a great day. I'll see you on another video, and keep thinking theology.